Hello, I'm Teresa Wat, Minister responsible for multiculturalism. In July of this year, we visited places rarely visited by others, but are of enormous significance to BC's shared history with Chinese Canadians and First Nations. The Fraser Corridor Heritage Landscape Project shows there is another story about Chinese Canadians, about how important Chinese Canadians were to the building of our province, both economically and culturally. I wanted to share these places, their historical importance, with all British Columbians.
One of the important things to know is that the Chinese were actually really important for building the infrastructure of BC. So not just the railroad, the CPR, which a lot of people know, but the Caribou Wagon Road, which was built in the 1860s to go up the side of the Fraser Canyon. So 20 years before the railroad was built, there was a wagon trail that was really difficult to hand build on the side of the canyon walls. And so the Alexander Bridge was in fact part of that wagon road system where people could travel up the Fraser on land rather than by boat. And at the time, it was the only crossing over the Fraser River. There was a canyon war, and what happened was that so many miners came during the gold rush that the First Nations who were here, they saw upwards of 20,000 newcomers come. There was a conflict where they drove out many of those miners. And what a lot of people don't know is that they didn't drive the Chinese out. There'd always been this sort of trivia that, well, the Chinese weren't driven out, but why? And it turns out that one of the reasons why is because the Chinese had actually asked, can we dig here? Can we pan here? And so they had shown sort of the respect for the people already here. It's a reciprocal relationship that was developed back then, and I think hopefully that's a lesson for us today.
The Chinese and Aboriginals work together, and so I'm so happy that today again, I'm, as a Chinese Canadian in British Columbia, invited back by the original community to work with them together. Only this time, the difference is that we're working with the broader community together, not just Aboriginal and Chinese, but also with the support of the BC government. So this is of great meaning to the Aboriginal community, and it's time that we bring it into the BC history so we can all understand it and help preserve the heritage value of this project.
This is the Onley property. It was a family-owned property and business for over 100 years.
Well, Yale is perhaps one of the most important places in terms of development of mining because it was the jumping-off point for the miners during the gold rush. This was the place that they would get supplies, and so Yale is a crucial place for understanding the history of mining in British Columbia. I think one of the things is if you only think of Chinese Canadians as miners, gold rush miners, and as railroad workers, then you miss that, in fact, the reason why the Cantonese called it Gamsan, they called it Gold Mountain, was not primarily because of the gold, but because you could make money here. So, the stores, the restaurants, feeding people, washing their clothes, they really did feel a part of the community and contributed constantly.
What is the current historical interest in this cemetery at this stage?
Well, I think this cemetery has been nominated as one of the 70 7 sites that were part of the public nomination process for the Legacy Initiatives Advisory Council. And so we really think of it as an important site, one of many. And partly why it's so important is because it dates back so far, that it goes right back to the gold rush time, that as the first Chinese arrived up the Fraser along with other gold rush miners, that this cemetery is a symbol of their presence. I think the other really important aspect of this cemetery is that because the people buried here, the family owned a store. It's one of the things that actually stores and restaurants that are almost ubiquitous everywhere in British Columbia small town. Many of these places, the last trace of the Chinese presence is the cemetery. I'm really looking forward to this. This is the fun part, because the river, it was the lifeblood of British Columbia. It was the way people got into the interior. There's some spots today you can only get there by raft, and so we're going to see things that rarely anybody sees.
This is Browning's Flat, and you can really see that this is a monumental place, and it's a tribute to the work of your ancestors and the relationship they developed over time with the Nhlakepin people. They relied on each other to teach each other about mining and about fishing from the river that provided sustenance to them while they were out here doing this really labor-intensive work. As part of a recent development, the Nhlakepin, or more specifically, the Lytton First Nation, nominated this place as a place of historical significance to the province of British Columbia and to Canada, because there are not many places that are as intact as Browning's. And Browning's is only one site. There are several of these sites down along the Fraser River in our territory.
What you're seeing right now is one of many, I think there's 14 or 15 of these ground sluices. And so you've seen lots of, photos of people with gold pans, on the river, sort of sitting by themselves, swirling it and looking for gold, or maybe a couple people with a rocker. This is different. This is placer mining, so they're still using water to recover the gold. But as you can see, they are literally moving tons and tons of dirt. And these rocks were hand carried and hand stacked to build these water sluices and then divert water from up to 2 kilometers away down through these sluices. And so they were trying to carry dirt through. And so they were really just trying to recover the minute amounts of gold that was in the soil. So it's very impressive. As you can see, a tree has grown in the middle of this waterway, and just, again, shows you how old this area is, that a tree could grow right in the middle, and yet the walls are still almost pristine, as if they were really hand-stacked yesterday.
I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our Nhlakepin territory, to one of our precious heritage sites where the Nhlakepin shared their heritage with Chinese ancestries. The people work together as a team, and we've always worked together as Nhlakepin and the Chinese ancestry who had good relationships.
I'm really very moved today because you are welcoming me coming to a territory. And I could imagine how your people welcome my Chinese ancestors when they came here to do the mining. It's because your people and our people go along with each other so well, with huge respect for one another. That's why we can work together. And I feel so honored that you are welcoming us to your territory today, and we can look at this amazing site. Thank you very much for your warm welcome.
To me, I was born and raised in BC, so to me, I heard a lot of stories coming down through my family about what it was like for them to come here as Chinese, 4 generations. And many of their stories weren't part of what was taught to me in school. And so part of this is actually rounding out the story of British Columbia so that the First Nations, the Chinese, and others who came here and met with European migrants, they made a world together. And so far, we've had pieces of that history, and sometimes incomplete, sometimes partial, sometimes even distorted. And right now, for me as a historian and as a teacher, and as a parent of my own kids, what I want is a common history, one that's common to us all, that we can have and share as a history together in British Columbia. And that's the only way we can move forward. I mean, you need a common past in order to have a shared future. And so to me, that's what this project's about. That's what it is to have British Columbians share a common history.